pleasure to be here, and I'd like to thank the Alliance for the opportunity. Let me first start by saying this. While many of our member companies have already established their own sustainability programs, the poultry and the egg industry as a whole is late to the table. We're far behind some of the other ag groups, and while that's embarrassing somewhat, we found out through some of the discussions that we've had with those groups that we can learn a lot from them, and we really shouldn't feel embarrassed that we're late to the table. So with that, I think we've decided to embark on this idea that we're going to put a program together for the poultry and the egg industry. And we decided, because we have a great relationship with many of our sister organizations, NCC and NTF and UEP, that this would be a collaborative effort. So we recently embarked on this, and while I say recently, it seems like it's been much longer than recently, but we'll talk about that just a little bit. So when Kay asked me to give this talk, she asked me to address the who, the what, the why, and the when of U.S. poultry and eggs, or the poultry industry sustainability assessment program. So I'm going to attempt to do that, and then I'd like to give you some background on what we've done here recently, and hopefully that gives you an idea of where we are, where we hope to go here in the future. So the who. We've again had the opportunity to talk with many of these other barnyard groups, and they've told us, if you want these programs to be transparent, if you want them to have a broad acceptance across all the consumer groups, all the customer groups, you need to engage those people when you develop this program. So we embarked on this journey about 1.5 years ago by identifying individuals within the poultry and the egg companies who were responsible for their particular sustainability programs. We first polled the companies, quite frankly, to see if they would be interested in putting a program like this together. And we heard a resounding yes. So when we reached out to the poultry and the egg companies and we asked them to identify an individual who would be responsible for participating in this work group, this internal work group as I've called it, they were more than happy to do so. So you see at the top of the list there, we've got the poultry integrators. We've tried to identify their sustainability managers, environmental managers. In the future, certainly we'll have to engage human resource managers or personnel, live operations, and health and safety, because all those things obviously come into play when we talk about the sustainability of our industry. The other groups that we have identified through these conversations that we've had for 1 year or so now are the customers. These are our customers that are interested in knowing what we do. You can see them listed there. That's just a short list of customers or companies that we feel as though we need to reach out to and engage in the development of this program. We've got non-governmental agencies. We've got those environmental NGOs that have a stake in this and really want to be involved in this process. We've got animal welfare groups that we feel as though need to be involved as well. The suppliers, that list has been a little bit more difficult for us to get a hold of, but certainly the pharmaceutical companies, certainly the Evonik of the world and the Nestle's of the world. Those are the companies that at some point in time we need to reach out to and ask for their engagement in this program. So the what? Roger showed you this chart you see on the right there. That is one process of developing a sustainability assessment, a sustainability definition and assessment program. And again, it does come from Dr. Marty Matlock, who is out of the University of Arkansas. We've engaged Dr. Matlock and asked him to help us with the development of this program. And he's been very helpful. At the end of the day, Roger discussed this too, it's about continuous improvement. It's not about necessarily sustainability, because everyone might have a different, or probably does have a different definition of sustainability. But it's about continuous improvement within our companies, within our agriculture industry. So that's what we have to focus on. Now, in doing that, it's necessary really to define goals, because if we don't have goals, it's going to be very difficult for us to measure and to track our improvement as we move through time. Now, there are two types of goals. You can have a numerical goal, which is absolute. So we're going to define a percentage of decrease of water use or energy use or whatever that may be. And then you have directional goals that are non-absolute. So it's something that we're going to strive for as an industry to improve as we move forward. I totally agree with Roger. He said it needs to be non-competitive. And the goals that we've discussed this within this internal working group that we've put together here recently, and they all agree that at this level, an industry-level sustainability program, the goals that should be established should be those non-competitive goals, those goals that are baseline goals that the industry can strive for, and then as they make improvements within their own company to do better. So the what? Again, some things have been done within the industry. A few years back, the egg side of the poultry and the egg industry took a look at their particular industry, looking back 50 years, and compared that to how they're doing now. And as you can imagine, it was a fantastic story to tell. So those things can be said for the turkey side of the industry and for the meat and broiler side of the industry as well. So those are some of the things that moving forward we hope to focus on and to put out there to tell the good story that we know we have. Life cycle analysis. We have similar good stories to tell about the reduction in our carbon footprint, the reduction in greenhouse gases, acidification, energy use. All those things need to be addressed as we move forward. Not to discredit increases in worker safety, worker welfare. So all those things need to be addressed when you look at your sustainability program. The when, I wish I could tell you when. I've had a number of conversations with these organizations, whether it's National Cattlemen's Beef Association or it's the dairy industry, as to how long this process should take. I've heard that it has taken some of these groups up to 2 years to just sit down and define sustainability for the industry. You have to realize when you bring all these groups to the table, and all these groups that we talked about earlier, the customers, the suppliers, the NGOs, and the internal stakeholders, they have some level of input into the process. So while I don't like the term, I'll use it, it seems to be like it's herding cats. And how do you come to a consensus on defining sustainability? How do you come to a consensus on developing the key performance indicators that are going to define sustainability for 1, 2, 3 pillars of sustainability? It's a long and involved process. Roger talked about the idea that an industry or a company would have to look at 130 KPIs.
Yeah, there's one with 100.
It's that in my mind, that's nearly impossible. There's one group, well-known group out there. When they came out originally with a set of KPIs for the meat burn industry, there were 39 KPIs. That's still far too many, in my opinion. So you have to whittle that down to a set of KPIs that number one, you can measure the success, you can define those KPIs, and you can really look to show that you're getting continuous improvement. So to develop those KPIs takes a long time. Definition of those key performance indicators. We could come up with a list of key performance indicators, but if we don't know the definition of each one of those key performance indicators, I might be talking about one thing, and another stakeholder might be talking about something entirely different. So there has to be consensus on that as well. We have to decide benchmarking. Are we going to look at the continuous improvement over a 5-year period, a 10-year period, a 15-year period? All those things come into play. And, of course, we've got to then establish those goals that we're going to measure our improvement against. And those goals have to be somewhat attainable. So to develop those takes some time. So I talked about our process. We began this process about 2 years ago, and when we sent out this poll and we asked the companies if they'd be interested in participating in this process, and they were, and we moved forward. We had an original meeting at a U.S. Poultry Environmental Management Seminar in September of 2015. So while not a lot of time has passed, it seems to me that we haven't moved as quickly as possible. But when I do talk to these other stakeholder groups, these other agricultural groups, they tell me that you guys are moving pretty fast. Again, it didn't take us 2 years to potentially come up with a draft definition of sustainability, and we'll talk about that in just a minute. So it's going to take some time. So the why. Number one, it's good for business. Clearly, if your company's not sustainable, if an industry is not sustainable, it's not going to be around. It promotes reducing operational costs and overhead, which is always good for the bottom line. It promotes creating a better work environment for our employees. We need to retain those employees, so if we do create that work environment, a better work environment for them, we're going to have them in place. It can make industry more competitive when we have economic downturns, and when we have to address issues like we're dealing with now, avian influenza, and with the pork industry, it was PD last year. So we can be more competitive when we have to address those issues that come up from time to time. And it increased the trust of customers. I suspect the millennials that we heard about today are a great group to look at when we talk about needing to increase their trust in us. The why, consumers want to know. Again, I suspect the millennials want to know why our industry, how our industry is sustainable. There are many groups out there, groups that I won't mention, but animal rights groups that would love to fill the void of why our industry is or is not sustainable. In fact, they have filled that void. So it's necessary for us to be engaged in that discussion. I talked with one individual with the National Pork Board, and he told me, if you can get your message out first, you gain the high ground. You're not in defense when it comes down to addressing why we want to protect our animals, why we want to be a sustainable industry. You talked about Andy, and Andy talked about this morning infinite water supply. Talk to the people out in California. I can guarantee you that they're seriously concerned about the sustainability of the agriculture industry out in California right now. Andy, again, this morning talked about the growing middle class. As the middle class grows, they're going to look to increase the protein intake on a daily basis. We as an industry are going to have to find a way to increase our production with less water, less land, to meet this growing demand, this growing population increase, and the demand in meat as we move forward. You know, many individuals want to demonize intensified agriculture. Well, the sustainability experts out there will tell you that this idea of intensified agriculture is necessary if we want to feed 9 billion people by the year 2050. And so they've turned this definition, sustainable agriculture, as a process or system where agriculture yields are increased without adverse environmental impact. So they realize that we have to keep these systems, but we've got to find a way to do more with what we've got right now, and less as we lose land and water. So where are we? Where is this poultry industry initiative at this point in time? I mentioned the initial meeting we had in September of 2015. That was just really a meet and greet at the environmental management seminar we held. We decided that we would hold a quick follow-up meeting in November of 2014. At that point in time, we started to look at this whole process that you saw a little earlier, this process that Dr. Matlock has developed over the years. So we looked at what is a potential definition of sustainability for the industry. And one of the things that we've heard from these other groups out there is that it would be beneficial if we tried to harmonize these definitions, if we tried to harmonize these KPIs. Because if we muddy up the water with multiple definitions of KPIs for the poultry industry, for the beef industry, for the pork industry, it's only going to create confusion for the consumer. So it would be a better idea if we try to harmonize these things. So we looked at different definitions, and the definition you see there is kind of a modification to a little degree of a definition of that Field to Market put together. They're one of these other ag groups that are out there trying to define and assess their sustainability. We looked at some mission statements. We looked at some vision statements that I won't get into. And then we started to look at, again, some of these harmonized key performance indicators that the industry might look at. We sat down and we decided, hey, as a group, as an internal stakeholder group, let's develop a materiality matrix to try to rank where, in our mind, those KPIs fall as far as our concern that we need to address first. So that's what you see at the bottom there. We held a follow-up internal stakeholder meeting just last month in Atlanta, Georgia. We started to really jump into the weeds of how we're going to move forward with this process. We addressed how we were going to make decisions within the work group. We identified external stakeholders, companies that we need to reach out to and try to engage in this whole process. We isolated contacts to solicit participation in the development of that program. And we started to look at third-party facilitators. We've been told that at times if your industry association is driving this, it might not give you a transparent viewpoint as some of those customers want to see out there. So we started to look at that, and we looked at some early deliverables that we could potentially put out there and tell this good story. The retrospective look that the egg industry did was a very good story, and certainly we have the same story to tell with the meat bird side of the industry. And then we examined methods of communicating and testing some of those messages. We've been told that while we, who are in the industry, think that we've got the great message that the consumer is going to respond to, it might not always be that way. So you need to test those messages. You need to refine them if possible according to those professionals that have been trained as far as communicating ideas and messages to the consumer and customers.